Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. The Israelis are showing concern from the recent developments that are happening in the Mediterranean with the declaration of Egypt and Turkey that they're going to be conducting a joint drill in the Mediterranean simultaneously with the arrival of the aid flotilla for Gaza that we spoke about yesterday. But it did not end there. Israel today is actually threatening and warning and saying that Egypt is responsible for these drones passing to Israel, to Gaza, and also the attacks that are being carried out from Yemen against Israel. What are they worried about, and what's leading Benjamin Netanyahu, which I will get to in a second, to ask the United States, demand that the United States applies pressure on Egypt to stop what they're doing inside of the Sinai Peninsula, because they are considering it, according to a source that spoke with the Israeli channel 12 today, very serious. What's happening in Sinai is very serious and exceptionally dangerous for Israel. The Ansarullah in Yemen, who are conducting attacks against Israel regularly, send drones and missiles. Some of them pass through the Red Sea, some of them pass over Egypt. Egypt denies that. Some of them go through Jordan, some of them, according to some reports, go and pass over the Mediterranean. Again, a route that will usually go over the Sinai Peninsula at some point, undoubtedly. The Israelis, they started to raise this with the American side to speak with the Egyptian authorities, because there is no communication, by the way, between the Egyptian authorities and the Israeli authorities at the political level, to say the least. And now everything is minimized almost to a halt completely in terms of any security arrangements inside of the Sinai Peninsula, in accordance with the Camp David Accords and the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Egypt, they asked it to stop or try and take down some of these drones that are coming from Yemen. Egypt refused. They said, we were not going to participate in anything. When the war with Iran began as well, Jordan agreed to intercept, if you recall, and they did intercept some of the Iranian missiles. They asked Egypt again, if anything passes through Egypt, please take it down. Egypt again said no. But these drones that they're speaking about here are more than just the attacks that are being conducted from Yemen. They are also in relation to smuggling to the Gaza Strip, and also smuggling inside of occupied Palestine, so inside of Israeli territories. And from an Israeli perspective, this could be very dangerous. Why? Because it can include things that are against Israel's national security, as they claim. So what is this doing exactly? This is leading the Israelis to ask the American authorities to apply pressure on the American side. More reports today that Benjamin Netanyahu is asking the American side to speak with the Egyptians, telling them, stop what you're doing in Sinai and reduce the forces. The Axios website reported today that during the Prime Minister's meeting with Marco Rubio on Monday, a list of activities in Sinai that he claims constitute a material violation by Egypt of the 1979 peace treaty with Israel was presented. An Egyptian official rejected the claim and said that the Trump administration did not raise the issue with Cairo. Now, what is Benjamin Netanyahu trying to get out of this? Netanyahu has been openly criticizing Egypt for the past several months. In recent weeks, he made statements that Egypt is preventing the Palestinians from the freedom of movement. They want to go out to Sinai, but Egypt is preventing them from a basic human right. The champion of human rights is asking Egypt to do that. The Egyptians know exactly what he's planning: a full ethnic cleansing campaign so that Israel can take control over the Gaza Strip, and a preparation for Israel to invade the Sinai Peninsula and occupy the Sinai Peninsula, because it's part of the greater Israel. Israel previously occupied Sinai. Israel has been an expansionist entity since the beginning. Israel occupied Sinai and did not leave Sinai up until the war that happened between them and Egypt, and also the peace treaty that came later on. That peace treaty split Sinai into 3 areas, A, B, and C, primarily to reduce forces in the area. That's completely out of the equation now. Hundreds of thousands of Egyptian forces are there. Israel is saying that now Egypt has underground tunnels in the Sinai Peninsula. Many of them are to store weapons, and to store missiles. Israel cannot really prove that they are indeed having missiles in these areas. However, they are saying this. The worry that's coming from Israel isn't just, of course, with all of the recent moves of Egypt in Sinai, but also Israel is very worried about the resumption of military exercises between Turkey and Egypt after 13 years. Israel has always worked on dividing the Arab and Muslim states in the region so that they can be the main power. They want to divide as much as possible, and now, especially after the attack in Qatar, the Arab Muslim states are realizing that no, Israel is actually the biggest threat, both to the people and the resistance, and also the authorities, regardless of their position. Now, this isn't necessarily forming a united front yet against Israel, but what it is doing now already is several coalitions. We've had the defense pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Other countries may join that. We have now these exercises between Egypt and Turkey that could very well reach a level of a defense pact between the two countries too. Israel is very worried about that. Yesterday, we were, of course, talking about the fact that they are holding these drills after they declared them just last week, and that these drills are going to be coinciding with the arrival of the aid flotilla. If you noticed yesterday, the aid flotillas coming from Barcelona and Northern Africa, alongside other locations, were approximately in this area over here. One day on, they arrived more deeper into the eastern or middle part of the Mediterranean Sea. If we calculate that day by day, tomorrow here, 22nd here, this is when the naval drills between Turkey and Egypt are due to start. Again, after a very, very short notice. 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. They're going to be very close to Gaza. Egypt and Turkey might be having the drills anywhere in this area here. So again, a lot can happen, and there's going to be a lot of tension during these times, especially because Israel's already preparing. Israel is already preparing to take down the flotilla and send its special forces to carry out the mission. Israel was also worried about the Chinese drill that took place between Egypt and China just several months back in the Sinai Peninsula that included unspecified equipment. By the way, the Chinese, they don't say much. Neither did the Egyptians, by the way. We do know that J-10s were participating. Egypt just last week deployed HQ-9B long-range air defense systems that they bought from China. Reports that they already received a batch of J-10s that give them air superiority with Israel in case of any air-to-air confrontation because of the long-range air-to-air missiles that the J-10Cs hold, something that is a strategic weapon that changes the equation and also changes the superiority of the Israeli Air Force in the region, something that the United States tried to work on for a very, very long time. That, of course, later led Egypt to diversify its weapons and manufacturing. Of course, again, Benjamin Netanyahu is now telling the Americans, please apply pressure on Egypt to stop what's happening. Egypt is telling them, we haven't heard anything from the American side. The American side is probably telling them, yeah, we are applying pressure, but, well, maybe we're not. Or Egypt is taking this as a way to instill more division, perhaps, between Israel and the United States. We're hearing more reports recently from Egypt and from Turkey as well about these moves. The Turkish foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, who was previously the intelligence minister, was saying today that actually it's not necessarily the Americans who are applying pressure and having influence on Israel. It's actually Israel that is having more influence on the United States, kind of hinting that, well, maybe they don't really want Israel altogether. So what's that leading to? Of course, the Israeli demands to the United States trying to apply pressure on Egypt to stop the military expansion and the preparedness in Sinai, proving, by the way, that Israel has bad intentions. Why? Because in previous reports and in previous statements, senior figures in the Israeli establishment, including the intelligence establishment as well, said that the Egyptians are actually preparing underground networks in Sinai to thwart any potential Israeli attack and to target Israeli fighter jets that may go into Sinai. Why would you have to be in Sinai anyways? Like, these people condemn themselves indirectly without really realizing what they're doing. But what we do understand is that the tensions are indeed there. The Israelis are realizing that fact, and they're blaming Egypt every Monday and Thursday of breaking the peace agreement, exploding the peace agreement, constantly saying that they are expanding more. They're doing this now with Turkey. They don't want peace with us. They're speaking about the fact that Egypt or the Egyptian president said that the Israelis are an enemy, or Israel is an enemy. They're taking all of that into consideration. Now, there were also direct warnings. The direct warnings came from Egypt, especially after the Qatar strike. They told everyone, especially the American side, there will be serious consequences if Israel acts on Egyptian territories like they did with Qatar. As a matter of fact, there were previous reports that Egypt also thwarted Israeli attempts to assassinate senior figures in the Palestinian resistance in Cairo. Why is Israel doing that, you may ask? Well, clearly because the intentions of Israel are not intentions only against Gaza. Soon after the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th, with Israeli knowledge and deliberate inaction, following Israeli mass murder of Israelis on the 7th of October, as confirmed by Israeli civilians, Israeli military personnel shoot everyone between these areas and Gaza, anything moving back to Gaza, regardless of who they are and what their identities are. Figures in the Israeli military warning their commanders, and their commanders giving them instructions, go back to sleep. Benjamin Netanyahu's office being notified hours before the attacks took place that there are suspicious movements, Israel letting it happen. What did Benjamin Netanyahu say after all of that? We're going to change the face of the Middle East. He did not say, oh, we want to get our prisoners of war back from Gaza. He said, we want to change the shape of the Middle East. Why? Because the man has prophecies in his brain and he wants to implement the greater Israel. He just said that he has this emotional attachment with the greater Israel. Greater Israel stretches from Egypt to Kuwait. And then if they do implement that, by the way, they might start talking about the greatest Israel that would stretch to Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? Because that was promised like 4,500 years ago, you know, before anything happened somehow. And they'll come up with some texts. Therefore, the region is realizing that Israel is not only a threat to the Palestinian people, like the Israelis wanted to tell the whole world, oh yeah, you know, we want peace, they don't want peace, and our only problem is Hamas and this and that. But the whole of the region, with the establishments that even have peace treaties with Israel or went into what's falsely labeled as the Abraham Accords, they would be next. Them thinking somehow that they would be protected by having this approach towards Israel clearly isn't going to bring them anywhere. Israel attacked Qatar, a mediator approved by the United States and by Israel. And by the way, Benjamin Netanyahu probably considered the fact that he has a case he's facing inside of Israel called Qatar Gate about senior officials very close to him being bribed by Qatar, regardless of how true or not that may be. But Benjamin Netanyahu has a track record of dealing with Qatar directly. They know that very well. They know that Qatar passed cash to Hamas with the knowledge of Benjamin Netanyahu after multiple wars and multiple agreements that Gaza and the Gaza authorities and the Israeli authorities had previously. So Netanyahu, by attacking them in a way, he's saying, oh, look, they're actually not my friends. And look what I can actually do to them. However, the message was far deeper. This isn't just an attack against Qatar. This is an attack against all of the countries in the region. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you. I'll open the space up for some community participation. If we of course have any questions, just a few before we end the live. So thank you everyone for tuning in for another live stream. Luai and Michael and Lovatar, thank you for your supers. Luai and Z saying, considering Israel does what it likes, do you think they will simply bomb the flotilla rather than intercept them in the water? I mean, from a military perspective, it's easier to send drones and bomb them rather than have this whole interception. However, judging by how badly Israel is doing now in the international scene, are they going to actually conduct a mass casualty event in international waters against people from dozens of countries and that hold many citizenships? In theory, they can, because these people killed Americans, they killed British people, they killed Europeans, they killed so many people in the past 2 years, and even before. They killed people from dozens of countries. Yet somehow the Western establishment doesn't recognize them as an entity of terror, which is the true definition of Israel, a terrorist state. Why? Of course, because of the links and because, you know, it's their front. However, it's going to be a real big mess for Israel if they do anything as such, and it would only solidify and increase and strengthen the calls that are asking for military intervention, despite all of the suppression attempts that are happening on social media outlets, trying to shut down the calls by the global community, people from all across the world, to take military action and take the Zionist regime down. So Israel, of course, is in denial. As a matter of fact, Netanyahu just declared a few days back that Israel is going to be spending unprecedented amounts of money on social media campaigns to whitewash itself, of course. We know very well, and we saw Benjamin Netanyahu appearing on some of these genocide sympathizing channels on YouTube's, or people who portray themselves as independent, most likely with huge lump sums of money, by the way, that would be undeclared. We all know the big mess that Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel is in after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Netanyahu had to defend himself twice and make a designated video saying, oh, it's ridiculous that they're claiming that we killed Charlie Kirk. It's actually Qatari Chinese propaganda, and they're probably funding these theories, rather than it actually being something organic and genuinely people raising real questions. Who were the people behind the man having the military instructions, right? Why does this guy who was arrested doesn't really match the man who indeed took the shot, who was arrested before and after, and why do they take Israel out of the picture all of a sudden, especially seeing as the man also refused to visit Israel? A report said that Israel also offered Turning Point USA, which is the organization that he was supporting, $150 million. And mind you, he's a Zionist, by the way. Charlie Kirk is a Zionist. He was supporting Israel. It's just that he started to have certain questions, right? And that's it. But that's what you get for dealing with these murderous snakes. And it happened. Benjamin Netanyahu was trying to defend himself and think that he can buy some more people with money. After losing a huge chunk of the conservatives inside of the United States and a huge chunk of the right in general. That's why they're only left with fractions of the far right, who they try and move, and them being moved without really knowing, some of these people, of course, led by Zionists. And they have this unholy alliance, thinking that, again, it can whitewash his image. And of course it will not, because we already reached the point of no return. Israel is in a really big mess, and it doesn't matter how much money they spend, there is no going back from everything that they've done. Paletti, Assalamu alaikum, Mahmoud, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Do you think that the current defense pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia will spread to the less regional influential countries like Syria and Lebanon and Iraq? Well, when that happened, I spoke about the prospect of that agreement expanding. There is potential there, and there are changes happening in the region. So some people try and, simplify matters, and unfortunately, some people emotionally start to analyze things based on their either ideologies or political affiliations. And really and truly, when you look at these things, you need to put your emotions aside a little bit and try and read the picture properly. Saudi Arabia's agreement with Pakistan is a very big shift. Again, that doesn't take away from anything that they've done in the past, or that's not to say that immediately something's going to happen now, but that's a very, very big shift. The dynamics is changing. The dynamics changing in the region completely. These are strategic losses for the United States and Israel. Israel was building and hoping for and working for years to have a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia always rejected because they had certain conditions that the Israelis did not want to follow. And they are one of the most influential Arab countries, not only in the region, but also globally. Where is that peace treaty going to go when Israel has a peace treaty with Pakistan, a country that does not recognize Israel, and a country that Israel constantly warns from, especially seeing as they have a nuclear weapon? There is absolutely a potential for that to happen, and the possibilities are greater than what we can even imagine. Who thought 2 years ago that we would be in this day seeing everything happening and moving so quickly? There is potential, and there are also other potentials of bilateral agreements. That's the thing that I was intending to, or have mentioned already in the beginning. Bilateral agreements. How? By this move that's happening, for example, between Turkey and Egypt. Because if you want to have a very big alliance, there is a lot of work and there's a lot of effort, and there are a lot of points that you need to totally agree on, and not all of the countries have the same influence or backing or level of arms, to say, to back themselves entering this agreement. And some countries that are weaker especially might be more susceptible to fall for American pressure telling them, no, don't get into that. Because if you do, we'll take you down on your own, something of the sort, or take you down on your own now, even before you enter. A lot of threats might be happening in the background, right? Don't think that, things are only what we read and see. Saying that, of course, though, it is absolutely a chance. There is a chance that this could happen, and there is a chance that we can see more bilateral agreements as well. That would also be part of the equation changing. TMZ-BGD, what do we know about what's in Sinai, and are there any new updates on countries receiving new military equipment? Yes, Sinai, well, over a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, the Egyptian armies, because Egypt had like multiple armies within their army, a field army and what have you, they conducted some of their biggest drills in the Sinai Peninsula with over 100,000 troops, heavy machinery and equipment, thousands of tanks, fighter jets, everything. The equipment that is in the Sinai Peninsula, there are already tanks, or air defense systems. Egypt recent reports said that Egypt has refurbed, expanded some of its airports or landings in Sinai to handle more fighter jets landing and being launched from there. Israeli intelligence officials stated, one of them was a senior leading figure in the Israeli Military Intelligence Directorate, who was in charge of monitoring the infrastructure in Arab countries, said almost 2 years ago, that Egypt has approximately 60 tunnels, 60 huge tunnels, some of them that can actually lead to Israel, according to other confirmations, that are more than 10 meters wide. Some of them can potentially fit fighter jets. So a lot is happening in Sinai. And Egypt just received new military equipment from China. They've been focusing a lot on China in the past couple of years. And if you want to ask why, well, it's because the Chinese arms would not have anything called, friend when they deal with enemy fighter jets. So fighter jets from Israel, or there's no friend or foe. There's no button that would take things down. And that has been evident from their experience, or when they were in practice between Pakistan and India, between the Pakistani and Indian army. We saw what the Chinese and Turkish weapons did to the American and Israeli weapons. And I hope that clarifies, and thank you for that. That was from TMZBGD. And let's go to your next question. Yazan Hijazi, if Egypt goes to war with Israel, how far would Egypt go as far as defeating Israel, a total erasure of Israel? Yes, I think they would go for the full cake. I mean, Egypt's foreign policy in the past several decades has been strategic peace, strategically being a stabilizing force. They've clearly had a peace treaty with Israel, very good relations with the United States, a huge role in the mediation talks for a ceasefire, many proposals, hours of work. And when I tell you about that, I mean like hundreds of hours of many, many people working round the clock to try and really solve matters, de-escalate, bring an end to the Israeli genocide in Gaza. They've been working really hard on that from day one, as they have done so traditionally. What they realized already now, although their statements, the statements of the Egyptian authorities might not really reach the level of the Egyptian preparations on the ground. The actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. If they would go into an altercation with Israel, they would know that Israel would be taking that as an excuse to go and reoccupy Sinai and potentially reach the Nile. And they would know that they would need to completely wipe them off the map. They would need to know that they need to target the heart of Israel. And guess what? They have the arms to do that. Egypt has the weapons that can really conduct a lot of damage against Egypt has a lot of weapons that can conduct a lot of damage against Israel, and they can take action very, very swiftly as well. They have arms from multiple countries, missiles that are very tricky to take down. All of these things are very important, and they are parts of the reason, or they're part of the reason why Egypt has been diversifying its military so much. Where were we? And thank you for that. That was from Yazan. If anyone, by the way, sent anything before, if you wouldn't mind highlighting it again, because we have a lot of messages. I'm trying to reach both of them on the live and on the streaming platform as well. Vision is saying, has Hamas Israeli force started face-to-face fighting in Gaza City? Will China be including the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact at some stage? Israel will semi-officially said that they started this operation, Gideon's Chariots B, or Netanyahu's Wheelchairs B, in Gaza. And this operation is targeting the civilians in Gaza. It's destroying multi-story buildings. They forcibly expelled 200,000 people. 800,000 remain, and they're saying they don't want to leave. And also, they don't have anywhere to go to. Israel has been killing infants and children every single day. Horrifying scenes and images coming from Gaza, beyond catastrophic situation. The Palestinian resistance is doing very well. They have been conducting attacks against the Israeli terrorists in parts outside of Gaza City. So wherever they are based, they're attacking them. Because Israel can't push for ground troops. That's why they're conducting this whole aerial campaign. They don't have the capacity to go. Initially, they said they need 5 divisions. Each Israeli division has been reduced by at least 50%. And they never specified how big a division is. But if a division was consisting of, I don't know, 15 to 20,000, now they're less than 8,000, most likely. Again, they don't give numbers. How do we base that? Well, we base that, at least we take it as a reflection, based on the fact that over 60% are refusing conscription. So on the ground, they have no chance. Plus, Israel reduced its ground forces to 1/3 of their size just 2 decades ago. And Benjamin Netanyahu is still banging on about that. So they have no chance. They stand no chance. In the past week, Israel was attacked in Rafah, on the borders with Egypt, and Israel was attacked in the northern part, near Beit Hanun. The most northern part, the most southern part. Areas that Israel and the Israeli army already confirmed have been completely done with, as in they eradicated the resistance in these areas. That just gives you a reflection of the reality on the ground, and that's again another proof that they will stand no chance against the Palestinian resistance in Gaza City, because they are wiping the floor with their genocidal faces everywhere they find them in Gaza. So they have no chance against the Palestinian resistance. Palestinian resistance is humiliating them in Gaza, everywhere. So how can they go against them in Gaza City? They stand no chance. Vision is saying, will China be included in the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact at some stage? It's difficult to know that, but from a Chinese perspective, Pakistan is a very large consumer of Chinese arms. I mean, I heard reports not long ago that approximately 80% of what they get is from China. That was evident from the war that they had with Pakistan. The fact they used primarily Chinese fighter jets, and then they had also used the Turkish drones as well, showing how effective they were against the American and Israeli arms that Modi was using. Not necessarily the case, because the equation changing would already be there, and they wouldn't necessarily want to show as if they are now under the umbrella of China, but rather have a more genuine multipolarity with a division of the influence in the region. But in effect, what we do have already now is a nuclear umbrella over the Gulf. A Pakistani, a Muslim nuclear umbrella, in effect, over Saudi Arabia, to say the least, if we don't want to include the Gulf. If there wouldn't be a united joint force, as pushed for both by Pakistan and by Egypt, by the way, we will have more bilateral agreements, like I said before. Turkey and Egypt might surprise us and have a declaration all of a sudden. More countries also having more initiatives. Wendy Gofton, could you comment on Trump designating Antifa a terrorist entity? How can a terrorist designate anything a terrorist? How can a warmonger, a child killer like Donald Trump designate anyone as... How can any Western establishment with a vast history of terror all across the world have the audacity to designate anyone as a terrorist? They use this terrorist thing to scare people and put people off resisting and standing up against oppression, against injustice, against unfairness, and against tyranny. And only the fools fall for it. If you're not a fool, don't worry. As in, I'm not directing that at you, of course. No, I mean in general. Only the fools get fooled by that. Those who realize their game, they know very well that Donald Trump is using this to intimidate people. Like he was having these campaigns against the Palestinian supporters in American universities. And all of these threats, expelling people. What is that? I thought you were the land of the free and the home of the brave. I thought that the United States is the beacon of free speech and democracy. What happened, Donald Trump? Donald Trump is a man who is a terrorist, who is supporting genocide, who is a warmonger, who is a Zionist stooge. He has no standing in designating anyone anything. Likewise, many of the Western establishment leaders, they have no standing. In the grand scheme of things, they're nothing but puppets and mass murderers. So we need to understand the narrative and how to approach this narrative, because this trick has been used by them for a very long time to intimidate the masses and try and stop just, legit criticism and freedom of speech. And what does it also show, by the way? How weak he is. He can't really take any criticism. Imagine that if you're the president, you're the president of a country, of America, can't you handle someone saying something? And please don't let Donald Trump use any excuse of violence and what have you. We saw what he done when he lost the election to Joe Biden. And he's been an advocate for guns and the gun industry and the arms industry in the United States. Likewise, Charlie Kirk, by the way, who ended up getting shot. They were very protecting the rights of every American to have arms. So Donald Trump is all over the place. I'm telling you, he's all over the place. He lost all credibility amongst his supporters, by the way, because we knew Donald Trump from the beginning. I mean, personally, when before the elections happened, when anyone asking about Trump, I was telling people, the man is a Zionist. Look at his initial thing, and don't buy into the false promises of the elections. Oh, I'm going to stop the wars, and I'm going to... How many things did he promise so far? Stopping the war in one day in Ukraine, stopping the war one day in Palestine. Did he stop the war, or did he push for more wars against his allies, against supposedly the greatest American allies? That's Donald Trump. And thank you, Wendy, for your question. Raylin Man, is the Pakistan nukes aimed at India is not meant for India, but is meant as defense pact, where is if Saudi Arabia or Iran gets cooked, they would launch on Tel Aviv instead. Well, when you have a defense pact, by the way, it's different to when you don't have a defense pact, although they're entitled, for example, to support Iran. As a matter of fact, when the Israel-Iran war happened, Pakistan told Iran, you have our full backing, everything is at your disposal. A defense pact means the other country would participate in case the other gets attacked, and that would include the nuclear deterrence. Now, of course, the nuclear is primarily for deterrence, but it's also there for a reason as well. Therefore, yes, if needs be, if the threat reaches that level, then it could be potentially used against Israel. That's why it's there. Now, of course, that doesn't mean it's going to be used very quickly. No, using nukes is a very big story. But when you talk about Israel, you're talking about a country that has nukes, but is allowed to have them and not tell anyone anything about them and not have any inspections and be very shady about it. And the West welcomes that, Western countries, as if, nothing happens when it comes to Israel. But they, of course, bang on and start barking like dogs against other countries that they don't like because they shouldn't have any sort of deterrence. No, Pakistan has a nuclear umbrella now over Saudi Arabia. And that would extend to Israel. That would extend to Israel too. And thank you for that. Whatever. The question, do you think Turkey, in that case, Egypt participation in the flotilla will be all talk, a double cross? Well, they did not declare that this is going to be anything to do with the flotilla. However, when I raised the concept or the prospect of them having some sort of participation, I was talking about the very peculiar coincidence, if you want to call it a coincidence, them having that. And again, multiple things can happen. There could be multiple theories, by the way. And if something does happen, an action will be required, both from Turkey and from Egypt, and they either stand in the face of or try to stop the flotilla rather than defending the flotilla, they have written their own destiny and fate forever. It's going to be over for them. And again, the timing is sensitive. The Israelis are preparing. The Turkish and Egyptian side are going to be having this drill. The least we can say is that it's going to be tense. And of course, the brave people on the flotilla, they're sharing everything with us, aren't they? They're publishing everything, so we will know from them. If anything happens, we're going to know. They're already, some of them, live streaming and posting stuff. So we will most likely know exactly what happens with that time. So we're talking about 2 days up to from the 22nd up to the 26th. And Lorne is also saying, if I think the flotilla will be successful, I genuinely think that there is a chance of success, absolutely. And everyone should have that mentality that there is possibility of success, because it started with 1 and then it's 50. And, there was another attempt of 1. There's 50 now. And we hope it succeeds. And if it does, then next time there's 1,000. And if it doesn't, the next time there's 1,000. And these people should be supported. These people should be, so it's shameful that no country has outright offered them naval protection in international waters, simply naval protection. So again, we're going to wait and see. It's going to be very tense. And at the end of the day, it will be coming out. Rise Up for Palestine. Hi, Mahmoud. What's your thoughts on Canada government banning the banned kneecap? And kneecap said they will take them to court. Of course they would want to ban kneecap. I mean, they're petrified, aren't they? It shows you the same, like what I told Wendy about Trump. These people are petrified. Banning music concerts. Why? Because they're brave? Banning artists because they stand up against injustice? Why? So I think it's really a condemnation to Canada at the end of the day. But hey, Canada, you know, they've had more and more tensions with Israel recently, Canada, right? The authorities. Of course, the people, it's different. People all across the world are waiting for that day where Zionism will be wiped off the face of the earth. But the Canadian Prime Minister, did you hear that statement that he made a couple of months ago? I'm looking for the link so I can share it with you. He was basically calling for a Zionist Palestinian state. What did he mean by Zionist, if you will, he said. Why? Because it would live side by side with the state of Israel. So he wants the Palestinians to be Zionists too. Imagine the audacity of these people. I want the Palestinian state to be a Zionist state. When this sick ideology has brought nothing but suffering and misery and wars and chaos to the whole world. Origin, ever since it came out that he is on the Epstein files, Trump seemed to be more of a slave. Do you think this is related? I think it's absolutely related. And Donald Trump knows very well that the Zionists, they have a hold on him. By the way, did you see the projection that happened in the, excuse me, when Donald Trump visited Britain, when he visited Windsor Castle? Did you see that projection on Windsor Castle? They basically projected a video of him on the castle with Jeffrey Epstein. This is just, you know, one of the images. There was a video moving around. He knows. Otherwise, how can you explain why he's not really releasing the files and being so sensitive about everything? The FBI director was asked if they had any mention of Donald Trump in the Epstein files, and he was saying, no, I never even discussed this with Trump. The FBI, the same organization in charge of more than 150 acts of terrorism in the US. People who pay criminals to conduct sabotage and criminal actions, people who employ cartels and drug lords and pay them to conduct actions. And F, thank you so much for your super much appreciated. Matthew, do you believe that the Gulf nations beside Yemen and Iran will actually lift a finger against Israel? I would say most of them are bluster but do nothing. Well, again, that would be totally up to them. I think what they have realized, or what some of them at least are starting to realize now, that by this attack against Qatar under any pretext, they realize that this umbrella of the United States was made out of fog. It wasn't an umbrella, because the United States will not help them against Israel, and Israel isn't necessarily only against the resistance and the people, it's also against the establishments. And will they lift a finger? Again, that is totally up to them. And it would depend on the circumstances that would happen. And that's why it's more necessary than ever for them to join forces. And we are already seeing the formation of new alliances happening as acts of primarily deterrence, by the way, so that anyone who thinks of attacking them, well, especially Israel in that case, would realize who would they be dealing with in case they do. Wavy, do you think that Turkey and Israel go to war will expose the fraud that is NATO and could possibly cause the breakup of NATO? Salam. Well, listen, I mean, we spoke about this drill. Okay, we have this drill and we have breaking news. Donald Trump warns that bad things are going to happen if Afghanistan refuses to return control of the Bagram airbase. Imagine the arrogance of this man. How arrogant is he? How arrogant can you be? Return the bag as if it's yours. As if, you know, America can choose a part of the world and say, this chunk belongs to me. But listen, this drill that happens, that's going to take place between both Turkey and Israel, Turkey and Egypt, excuse me, is putting a lot of things to the test. Secondly, NATO, it's not as if the NATO is like united or what have you. The NATO, many NATO countries, they have a lot of differences between them. And also you need to invoke Article 5 to kind of put them to the test, ask for assistance in case you're attacked, which usually doesn't happen in case unless there is something very big happening. But yeah, I mean, in the past 3 years, we have seen so many frictions inside the NATO, countries in the NATO and the EU states and NATO member states opinion of the NATO, and could cause a breakup. Trump himself is also, his moves against the NATO are putting the whole NATO at risk as well. And thank you for that. Okay. Cool. We'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you for everyone who participated in the chat. Apologies, of course, if I haven't reached all of your comments, just for the time limit and the amount of comments, of course, as well. Thank you for everyone who participated, everyone who sent supers, F, Lovatar, Michael, Melissa, and Luai. In the meantime, everyone, I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow, either with video or several video segments or live stream as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or night, depending on where you are. Stay blessed, take care, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.